I remember the exact sound my knees made when they hit the floor. A dull, hollow thud on the cold kitchen tile. The same tile my mom used to scrub on her hands and knees every Saturday morning. My vision was blurry, the words on that piece of paper swimming in front of me. I couldn't breathe. It felt like the entire world had just fallen out from under me. And the worst part? I had nobody to blame but myself. This is my story. My name is Eric Williams. I'm 34 years old, and I used to be a successful real estate agent in Miami. I used to have it all, or at least I thought I did. Let me take you back. Before the lawyer's call, before the silence. Back to when my biggest problem was my mother's love. After my dad died, it was just me and Mom, Patricia Williams. 61 years young, she'd always say. I moved her into my sleek, modern Miami apartment. It was supposed to be temporary, just until she got back on her feet. My place was all sharp edges and cool colors, glass tables, stainless steel appliances, a place for everything and everything in its place. It was my sanctuary from the cutthroat world of luxury condos and million-dollar commissions. Then, Mom arrived, and she brought her life with her. It started small. A crocheted blanket draped over the back of my gray sofa, the smell of her lavender potpourri filling the air. A handwritten note taped to the coffee maker. "Hope you have a sweet day, honey. Love, Mom." I'd come home from a long day, my head pounding from negotiating contracts, and I'd find my immaculate kitchen counter covered in flour. She'd be baking his favorite peanut butter cookies, the kind my dad loved. At first, it was nice. I'd been lonely. But then the stress started to build. I was chasing this huge deal, a waterfront property for a demanding tech CEO. Every showing, every phone call felt like life or death. My commission on this one sale was more than most people make in a year. I had to be perfect. My life had to be perfect. And my mom, she didn't fit the picture. Her kindness began to feel like sandpaper on my nerves. I'd be on an important call, pacing in my home office, and she'd quietly open the door to leave a plate of sliced fruit. She was just being sweet, but all I could see was an interruption, a distraction. I'd hang up and find all my dress shirts, the expensive ones, folded wrong. She'd done my laundry. She was trying to help, but the folds weren't crisp. They were soft, messy, just like her presence in my orderly life. I started seeing her as a problem to be managed, a variable I hadn't accounted for. I stopped seeing my mom. I saw a liability. I'd come home and instead of saying hello, I'd point out the water spots on the glass shower door or complain that the TV was too loud. Her face would fall, just for a second, before she'd paste on a smile. "Sorry, honey, I'll be more careful." The night it happened, I was a live wire. I was hosting a virtual walkthrough for the tech CEO. This was it, the final pitch. My future was on that video call. My apartment was silent, the lights were perfect, I was in the zone. And then, from the kitchen, I heard it, the familiar, gentle hum. She was using the blender, making one of her healthy smoothies. The sound was like a drill in my skull. My client on the screen frowned. "Is everything all right, Eric?" I muted my mic. "Mom," I hissed, storming out of my office, "I'm in a meeting." She jumped, her hand flying to her chest. The blender sputtered to a stop. "Oh, Eric, I'm so sorry. I just thought you might need a little energy boost." Something in me snapped. All the weeks of pent-up frustration, the sleepless nights, the pressure, it boiled over. I didn't just say the words, I spat them. They felt like acid on my tongue. "You are such a burden, Mom, a constant burden. I can't live like this anymore. I can't have you ruining everything." The silence that followed was heavier than any sound. It pressed down on me, suffocating. The anger drained out of me as quickly as it had come, leaving nothing but a cold, sick feeling in my gut. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just looked at me. Her eyes, the same shade of brown as mine, were deep with a sadness I'd never seen before. She slowly wiped her hands on her flower print apron. Her movements were calm, deliberate. She looked smaller somehow. She nodded, just once. Her voice was so soft, I almost didn't hear it. "I'll make it easier for you then." She turned and walked back to the kitchen. I stood there, frozen, my heart hammering against my ribs. I went back to my office, finished the call on autopilot. I got the deal. I should have been ecstatic. I felt nothing. The next few days were quiet. She stayed in her room a lot. I told myself it was for the best. We needed space. I came home from work on the third day, and the apartment was different. The lavender smell was gone. The crocheted blanket was gone from the couch. Her bedroom door was open. The room was empty. Not just of her, but of her. The little trinkets, the photos, the familiar clutter of her life, all of it gone. There was just a single envelope on her perfectly made bed, with my name on it. I never opened it. I was still angry. I told myself she was being dramatic. She'd come back. She always did. Months passed. The silence in the apartment became permanent. I told myself I liked it. This was what I wanted, right? A clean, quiet, successful life. I was lying to myself, and I knew it. The place felt like a tomb. Then the call came. A lawyer. His voice was calm, professional. "Mr. Williams, I'm sorry to inform you that your mother, Patricia Williams, has passed away." The phone slipped from my hand. The world didn't just stop. It shattered. I'm driving to my childhood home now, the house I grew up in. It's a small, blue-sided house in a quiet neighborhood, nothing like the glamorous properties I sell. The lawyer said there were matters to discuss. The will. I assume it's a formality. I'm her only son. Of course, the house is mine. Maybe I'll sell it. Use the money to buy a bigger apartment. The thought feels hollow. I pull into the driveway. The grass is neatly trimmed. The flower beds she loved so much are blooming. But something's wrong. The front door opens before I can even get my key out. A man I've never seen before is standing there. He's middle-aged, wearing a simple plaid shirt and jeans. He looks comfortable, like he belongs. "Can I help you?" he asks. "I'm Eric Williams," I say, my voice tight with confusion. "Patricia's son. This is my house." The man, Mr. Green, his name is, just shakes his head slowly. He doesn't look angry or triumphant. He looks sad. For me. He holds out a folded document. "I'm sorry, son. Patricia, she transferred the deed. The house belongs to me now." The words don't make sense. They bounce around in my head, meaningless. My house, my mom's house, gone, given to a stranger. I push past him, into the house. It smells the same, like lemon polish and baked apples. Everything is exactly as she left it. And there, on the kitchen table, is another envelope. My name, in her familiar looping handwriting. My hands are shaking so badly I can barely tear it open. I unfold the paper. I read the first line. And my legs give out. I collapse into the same wooden chair I used to sit in as a kid, waiting for her to finish making dinner. The one she'd always wait in for me to come visit. I can't see the words anymore. My eyes are filled with tears. All I can do is sob. The sound is ugly and broken, echoing in the silent, familiar kitchen that isn't mine anymore. I keep thinking about how far a single moment can reach, how one sentence can change your entire life. I wonder if anyone else out there knows what that feels like. I find myself just staring at this screen, wondering where you all are. I feel so alone in this. So, just tell me what city you're in, just so I know I'm not completely alone in this mess I made. The drive to the lawyer's office was a blur. I sat in a leather chair that felt like it was swallowing me whole. The room was too bright, the air too cold. The lawyer, a man named Mr. Davies, with kind eyes that didn't match his job, slid a copy of the transfer document across the polished desk. "It's all perfectly legal, Mr. Williams," he said, his voice gentle.
Patricia came to me about 3 months ago. She was very clear about her wishes. I stared at the paper. My mother's signature was there, neat and sure, next to Mr. Green's.
Why? The word came out as a croak. Why would she do this? Mr. Davies sighed, taking off his glasses. She didn't provide a reason. She only said she wanted the house to go to someone who would appreciate it. She mentioned Mr. Green had been a good neighbor, helped her with her groceries, fixed a leaky faucet. Small things, small things. The words hit me like a physical blow. All the small things I had dismissed, all the small things she had done for me that I had called a burden. I left the office and drove back to the blue house on autopilot. I didn't know where else to go. Mr. Green's car was gone. The house was empty. I still had the key. It felt like a trespass turning the lock, but I had to go back inside. I had to read the letter again. I had left it crumpled on the kitchen table. The house was silent, but it was a different silence than my apartment. This silence was warm. It was full of memories. I could almost hear the echo of her laugh from the living room. I could smell the ghost of 1,000 Sunday dinners. I walked to the kitchen. The letter was still there. I smoothed it out on the table, my hands trembling. I made myself read it slowly this time. Every word was a fresh cut. My dearest Eric, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you've learned about the house. Please don't be angry with Mr. Green. This wasn't about punishing you. It was about setting us both free. When your father died, a part of me went with him. Moving in with you, I thought I could find a new purpose, being near my son. Taking care of you, even in my small way, made me feel useful. It made me feel like I still had a place in your world. But I saw the look in your eyes, the frustration when I folded your shirts wrong, the irritation when I made too much noise. I watched my love become a weight on your shoulders. I heard the truth in your voice that night. You saw me as a burden. And the hardest part was knowing you were right. I had become one. This house was filled with a lifetime of love, with memories of your father, of you as a little boy running through these rooms. I couldn't let it become just another asset for you to sell. I couldn't let my memory become another thing for you to manage. Mr. Green sees this place for what it is, a home. He will care for it. He will live in it. He will appreciate the life within these walls. I left you something, Eric. It's not the house. It's in the attic, in the old oak chest. It's everything I had left to give you. I love you. I have always loved you. And I am so sorry that my love became a cage for you. Be happy. Build a life that is truly yours. Love always, Mom. I read it 3 times. Then I just sat there, the paper held tight in my fist. The sobs came again, racking my whole body. It wasn't just grief, it was shame, a deep, profound shame that burned hotter than any anger. She hadn't given the house away to hurt me. She had given it away because she finally believed what I had told her, that she was in the way, that her love was a problem to be solved. I had convinced her of that. My words, my resentment, my constant sighing, they had worked. I had successfully pushed away the one person who loved me unconditionally, and she had spent her final months believing she was doing me a favor by disappearing. I climbed the pull-down stairs to the attic. It was dusty and smelled of old wood and memories. The oak chest was in the corner, right where it had always been. I lifted the heavy lid. Inside weren't valuables. There were no stocks or bonds or jewelry.
It was filled with my life, my old report cards with her proud notes in the margins, every faded drawing I'd ever made for her, carefully preserved, photo albums bursting with pictures of Christmases, birthdays, beach vacations, my first Little League uniform folded neatly, a box of all the letters I'd sent from college, the ones where I was too busy to call. And at the very bottom, a small locked metal box. I knew what it was, my father's. I remembered the key. It was on her key ring, the one I'd seen 1,000 times. The key was taped to the bottom of the chest's lid.
My hands were shaking so hard I could barely fit the key into the lock. I lifted the lid. It was full of cash, neat stacks of bills bundled with rubber bands. A note sat on top. "For your future, Eric. It's not much, but it's everything we managed to save. Your father always said it was for you, for a down payment on a house you could build a family in, a real home. Don't just buy a property, build a life. We love you." I fell to my knees right there in the attic dust. The weight of it all finally crushed me. She hadn't disinherited me. She had given me the only inheritance that mattered, my history, my story, and a final desperate lesson in what a home really is. It isn't a sleek apartment or a valuable asset. It's the place where you are loved, flaws and all. And I had thrown mine away. I sat in that dusty attic for a long time, surrounded by the proof of a love I had been too blind to see. I thought about the last words I ever said to her. I thought about the empty apartment waiting for me. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I would trade every commission, every luxury condo, every single dollar, just to hear the blender running one more time. I drove back to my apartment in Miami. The city lights blurred past my window. They usually made me feel powerful, successful. Tonight, they just looked lonely. I parked in my building's underground garage. The concrete felt cold. The air smelled of exhaust and money. It was a tomb. I rode the elevator up to my floor. The doors opened into my hallway. It was perfectly silent. I used to love that. Now the silence felt heavy. It pressed on my ears. I unlocked my door and stepped inside. My apartment was exactly how I'd left it. Everything was in its place. The glass tables were spotless. The gray sofa was perfectly smooth. No crocheted blanket, no note on the coffee maker. It was clean. It was empty. It was dead. I dropped my keys on the counter. The sound echoed. I walked to the kitchen. I opened the fridge. It was full of expensive, pre-made meals from a gourmet shop. No containers of her leftover soup. No plate of cookies wrapped in plastic. I closed the door. I wasn't hungry. I went to my home office, the scene of the crime. I sat in my expensive ergonomic chair. I looked at the blank screen of my computer. I had a dozen emails waiting, clients, new listings, money to be made. I didn't open a single one. All I could see was her face, that last night, the hurt in her eyes. It wasn't anger. It was worse. It was acceptance. She had accepted the terrible thing I'd said about her. She had believed me. I got up and walked to her old room. I hadn't been in there since she left. I turned the knob. The room was a guest room again. The bed was made with stark white sheets. There were no personal items, no photos, no scent of her lavender lotion. I had hired a cleaning service to erase her. They had done a perfect job, but I could still feel her in here, a ghost in the empty space. I remembered finding the envelope on the bed, the one I never opened. What was in it? An apology? A plea? I would never know. I had been too proud, too angry. I had thrown it away. I went back to the living room and sat on the edge of the sofa.
I looked at my phone. I scrolled through my contacts. I stopped at Mom. My thumb hovered over it. I wanted to call her. I wanted to hear her voice. I wanted to tell her I was sorry, that I was a fool, that I didn't mean it. But I couldn't. The line would be disconnected. The number would belong to a stranger. She was gone. Really, truly gone. And I had killed whatever was left of our relationship months before her heart finally stopped. The next morning, my alarm went off at 6 a.m. like always. For a second, everything was normal. Then the memory hit me. A physical pain in my chest. I got up. I went through the motions. Shower, dress, tie. I looked in the mirror. I looked successful. I looked hollow. I went to work. The real estate office was all glass and light. My colleagues were buzzing. Someone had just closed a big deal. There were congratulations. Someone slapped me on the back.
Big commission for you this month, Williams. I forced a smile. It felt like a crack in my face. I sat at my desk. I pulled up the file for the tech CEO's property, the deal I had closed the night I broke my mother's heart. The commission was massive. It was sitting in my bank account right now. I had won. I had gotten everything I thought I wanted. It felt like ashes. My phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I didn't know. Eric, it's David Green. I'm at the house. There's something else here for you. Your mom left it with me. Can you stop by? My heart jumped into my throat. What else could there be? Hadn't I been through enough? I typed back a reply. My fingers were clumsy. I'll be there after work. The day dragged. I showed a penthouse to a young couple. They were holding hands, dreaming of their future. I gave my pitch. I talked about square footage and amenities. My voice sounded flat. All I could think about was the old oak chest in the attic. A real home. I drove back to my childhood house after my last appointment. The sun was setting, painting the sky in oranges and pinks. Mr. Green's car was in the driveway. He was watering the flower beds my mom had loved. He saw me and gave a small, hesitant wave. He didn't smile. He just looked at me with those sad, knowing eyes. "Hey," I said, getting out of my car. My voice was rough. "Eric," he nodded. "She left this for you. Told me to give it to you after. He held out a small, worn recipe box. It was the one she'd always kept on the kitchen counter. The wood was stained and smooth from years of use. I took it. It was heavier than I expected. "What is it?" "Her recipes," he said simply. "All of them, written out by hand. The peanut butter cookies, the beef stew your dad loved, all of it." He paused, looking at the box in my hands. She said a house isn't a home without the smells from the kitchen. She wanted you to be able to have that, wherever you ended up. I held the box. I couldn't speak. This was her final gift. Not a house, but the instructions on how to build a home, how to fill it with love and warmth and the smell of peanut butter cookies. Mr. Green turned off the hose. "I'll leave you to it," he said softly, and went inside. I stood alone in her driveway, holding the box. I felt the first tear roll down my cheek, then another. I didn't try to stop them. I just stood there and cried, holding a piece of her heart in my hands. How do you even begin to fix something you broke so completely? Is there a way back from a mistake that big? I got back in my car, the recipe box sitting on the passenger seat. I didn't drive away immediately. I just sat there in the fading light and stared at it. The wood was warm from the sun. I could see little flour stains on the lid. I could almost smell the cinnamon and sugar that always seemed to cling to her hands. I opened the box. The cards were inside, neatly organized. Her handwriting filled every one. Not just ingredients and instructions, little notes to herself. "Eric hates nutmeg, use cinnamon instead. Double the chocolate chips, he deserves a treat after his big test. Robert's favorite, make it for his birthday." My dad's name. She'd written his name. Every recipe was a memory, a timestamp of a life I had taken for granted.
This wasn't just a box of instructions. It was a map of my childhood, a record of her love measured in cups and teaspoons. I drove back to my apartment. The city lights were coming on. They looked different tonight, less like achievements, more like distant fires. I carried the box upstairs like it was made of glass. I walked into my sterile kitchen. I put the box on the counter. It looked wrong there. It looked out of place. This kitchen was for show, for reheating things. It wasn't for making anything. I picked a card at random, her peanut butter cookie recipe. The edges were stained with butter and brown sugar. I read the instructions. Cream the butter and sugars until light and fluffy. I could hear her voice saying it. I didn't have any of the ingredients. My cabinets were full of pasta and expensive olive oil. My fridge had wine and condiments. I had nothing real.
Nothing to build with. I went back out. I drove to a grocery store. I walked the aisles, feeling like a stranger in a foreign land. I found flour, baking soda, a bag of chocolate chips. I stood in front of the butter, confused by the choices. She always just bought the blue box. I brought everything home. I laid it all out on my cold granite countertop. I found a mixing bowl. I preheated the oven. The beep echoed in the quiet. I started following the recipe, step by step. My hands were clumsy. I splattered egg on the counter. I got flour on my dress pants. I didn't care. I creamed the butter and sugars. I watched them turn pale and smooth. I added the vanilla. The smell hit me, and it was like a punch to the gut. It was her smell. It was the smell of coming home from school. I folded in the chocolate chips. I dropped spoonfuls onto a baking sheet. They looked messy, uneven, nothing like the perfect uniform cookies she always made. I put them in the oven. I set the timer. I sat on the floor, my back against the cabinets, and waited. The apartment began to fill with the smell, that warm, sweet peanut butter smell. It crept out of the kitchen. It went into the living room. It went down the hall. It was the first time my apartment had ever smelled like a home. The timer went off. I pulled out the tray. The cookies were a little too brown on the edges. They weren't perfect, but they were mine. I made them. I let them cool for a minute. Then I picked one up. It was still soft. I took a bite. It tasted like forgiveness. It tasted like 100 afternoons. It tasted like my mom. And I broke down. Right there on the kitchen floor, surrounded by the mess I had made, eating a cookie that tasted like my past, I cried. I cried for her. I cried for my dad. I cried for the man I had become. A man so focused on building a portfolio that he forgot how to build a life. The cookie was a little too salty from my tears, but I ate the whole thing. I knew then what I had to do. It wasn't about the house. It wasn't about the money. It was about the recipe. It was about starting from scratch. The next day, I called my broker. I told him I was taking a leave of absence. He thought I was crazy. "You're on a hot streak, Eric. This is when you push." I didn't care. I packed a bag. I didn't know where I was going. I just started driving. I left Miami behind. I drove north. I drove for hours, the recipe box on the seat beside me. I ended up in a small beach town, the kind of place my parents used to take me for summer vacations. I rented a tiny furnished cottage a block from the sand. It had a small old kitchen with a gas stove. The first thing I did was go to the local market. I bought groceries, real food. I bought a crock pot. I bought a mixing bowl that wasn't for display. I started cooking my way through the box. I made her beef stew. It took all afternoon. I made her lasagna. I made her apple pie. My cottage was never quiet. It was always filled with the sounds and smells of a life being lived. I didn't look at my phone. I didn't check my email. For the first time in a decade, I was still. One afternoon, I was sitting on my porch, shelling peas I'd bought from a farm stand. An older woman from the cottage next door waved. "Something smells wonderful," she called over. "It's my mom's recipe," I said. And it didn't hurt to say it. It felt good.
She came over. We talked. Her name was Carol. She told me about her son who lived in Chicago. I told her I was from Miami. I didn't tell her why I was here. I just said I was taking a break. A few days later, she brought me a loaf of banana bread. "You look like you could use some home cooking," she said with a wink. I started to understand. It wasn't a transaction. It was a connection. It was the small things, the things I had dismissed as worthless. I've been here for 3 weeks now. The salt air is cleaning something out of me. The slow pace is mending something I didn't know was broken. I'm not the same man who drove away from Miami.
I still have the money from the chest. It's in the bank. I don't know what I'll do with it. Maybe I'll buy a little place here, a place with a big kitchen, a place where I can make a mess, a place where the smell of cookies can soak into the walls. I think that's what she wanted. Not for me to have a house, but for me to understand what one is. She gave me the blueprint, the recipe. It's up to me to do the work. I failed her in so many ways, but I won't fail her in this. I will build a life, a real one with room for more than just myself. It starts with a single recipe. It starts with accepting a loaf of banana bread from a neighbor. It starts with realizing that love isn't a burden. It's the only thing that makes any of this worth it. If you've ever had to rebuild from the ground up, you know how terrifying it is. You know how lonely it feels. But if you're out there, just know it's possible. The first step is the hardest. It's admitting you were wrong. If this story meant something to you, if it hit a little too close to home, let me know. Leave a comment, hit that like button, and subscribe. Because this isn't the end of my story. It's the beginning. And I have a feeling the next chapter is gonna be better. I sat on the porch of my little rented cottage, the recipe box open on the wicker table beside me. The air smelled of salt and the jasmine climbing the trellis. Carol, my neighbor, had just left after bringing over a fresh pitcher of sweet tea. We didn't talk about anything important, just the weather, the price of shrimp at the market, her grandson's soccer game, normal things. The kind of things I used to think were a waste of time. But now, I hung on every word. After she left, I picked a recipe card. Not a fancy one, not a holiday dish. It was for her simple potato soup, the kind she made when I was sick, or when the weather turned chilly, or when Dad had a long day. The card was splattered with broth. I could see her fingerprint in a smudge of butter. I went inside to my small, outdated kitchen. I pulled out a pot. I started chopping onions. The tears that came to my eyes weren't just from the onions. They were from the memory of her standing at her own counter, humming, doing this exact same thing, a simple act of care. I had called it a burden. I sautéed the onions in butter, just like the card said. The sizzle was a familiar sound. I added the diced potatoes, the broth, a bay leaf. I let it all simmer. The cottage filled with a warm, savory smell that felt like a hug. It felt like her. While it cooked, I did something I had been avoiding for weeks. I took out my phone. I opened my banking app. I looked at the balance. The number was still there, the money from the oak chest. It was more than I had ever had at one time. In my old life, that number was a score. It was proof I had won. Now, it just looked like numbers. It had no smell. It couldn't make soup. I closed the app. I opened my contacts. I scrolled past clients, past my broker, past colleagues. I stopped at Mr. Green. I hadn't spoken to him since the day he gave me the recipe box. I took a deep breath and pressed call. It rang 3 times. Hello? His voice was cautious. Mr. Green? It's Eric Williams. A pause. Eric, how are you? I'm okay, I said, and for the first time, it was mostly true. I'm calling because I need to know. The day she gave you the deed, what did she say? He was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. She came over with a plate of cookies, he said finally, his voice soft with memory.
She sat at my kitchen table. She said you were a good son, a successful man. She was so proud of you. Each word was a knife. Then why? I whispered, my throat tight. She said you were carrying too much. She said you thought you had to do everything alone, that you saw her love as a weight. She said if she gave you the house, it would just be another thing for you to manage, another asset. It wouldn't fix what was broken inside you.
He cleared his throat. She said the house was just wood and nails. What she wanted to give you was a home, and she didn't know how to do that anymore, so she gave you the tools instead, the recipes. I looked at the pot of soup bubbling on my stove. The tools. She asked me to look after the place, Mr. Green continued, said it deserved to be lived in by someone who understood it was a home, not an investment. She was a smart woman, your mom. She was, I choked out. Thank you for telling me. Anytime, Eric. Take care of yourself. I hung up and stirred the soup. Her reasoning was so clear, so loving, it took my breath away. She hadn't punished me. She had tried to save me. She had loved me enough to give me the one thing I truly needed, even though I was too blind to see it. Even though I had hurt her. I ladled the soup into a bowl. I sat at my small two-person table and ate. It tasted exactly like it used to. It tasted like being 10 years old and home from school with a fever. It tasted like safety. That night, I couldn't sleep. The conversation with Mr. Green played over and over in my head. She said you were carrying too much. I got out of bed and went to the kitchen. I opened the recipe box again. I took out all the cards, spreading them on the counter. I wasn't looking for a recipe this time. I was looking for her. And I found her. In the little notes, in the stains, in the careful way she'd written a pinch of love next to the salt in her pancake recipe. This was her legacy, not a property deed. This. A crazy, quiet idea started to form in the back of my mind. It was just a flicker, a what if. The next morning, I drove to the next town over, where there was a decent library. I sat at a computer and started researching. I looked up small business loans. I looked up commercial leases. I wasn't thinking about condos or penthouses. I was thinking about a storefront, a small, warm space with a big window. I was thinking about a soup shop, not a fancy restaurant, a simple place, a place that served my mom's potato soup and her beef stew and her chicken and dumplings, a place where the smell would draw people in from the street, a place that felt like a home. I spent hours there, scribbling notes on a legal pad. I calculated the cost of bowls, of spoons, of a good industrial stove. I thought about calling it Patricia's. Just that. Simple. It felt terrifying. It felt insane. I was a real estate agent. I sold dreams. I didn't build them from scratch with my own two hands. But then I thought about the cookie I ate on my kitchen floor. I thought about the blueprint she had given me. This was the next step. This was me using the tools. I drove back to my cottage, my heart pounding with a fear that felt good. It felt alive. It wasn't the cold fear of losing a commission. It was the warm, terrifying fear of trying to build something real. I pulled into my driveway and saw Carol sitting on her porch. She waved me over. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, smiling. "I think I have," I said. "A good one." "Carol, what would you think if this town had a soup place, a really good one?" She looked at me, her head tilted. "I'd think it was about time," she said. "Why? You know someone?" I took a deep breath. The sea air filled my lungs. "Yeah," I said, "I do." Her smile widened. "Well, I'll be your first customer." Sitting there on her steps, telling this kind, practical woman about my half-formed, crazy dream, I felt a connection I hadn't felt in years. This was it. This was the work. It was messy and uncertain, and it probably wouldn't make me rich, but it would create a soup that tasted like home for someone else. It would create a place where people could connect.
It would honor my mom. The money in the bank finally had a purpose. It wasn't a score anymore. It was seed money. It was a down payment on a new life. I'm not there yet. I have 100 more steps to take, permits to get, a space to find, a million things to learn. But for the first time, the future doesn't look like a spreadsheet.
It looks like a steaming bowl of soup on a cold day. It looks like a handwritten recipe card, stained with love and use. I failed her in so many ways, but I won't fail her in this. This is my apology. This is my promise. This is me finally coming home. If you've ever started over, you know the fear, but you also know the hope. Let me know in the comments what your soup shop is. What's the one thing you'd love to build from the ground up? Give this video a like if this journey resonates with you, and subscribe to follow along, because the next part of this story is just getting started. The For Lease sign was faded, swinging slightly in the warm breeze coming off the ocean. The building was small, tucked between a bookstore and a surf shop, with a big picture window that was streaked with salt. It was perfect. My hands were sweating as I dialed the number on the sign. This was it. No more planning. No more dreaming. This was doing. The realtor was a cheerful woman named Brenda. She saw the look in my eyes, the mix of terror and determination, and just smiled. "First business?" she asked, unlocking the door. "First everything," I admitted. The inside was a blank canvas, dusty with scuffed linoleum floors and walls that needed a fresh coat of paint. But I didn't see the dirt. I saw the potential. I saw a long counter where people could sit on stools. I saw a few small wooden tables. I saw my mom's recipe box sitting open on a kitchen pass-through. I could already smell the soup. I used the money from the chest for the security deposit and the first 3 months' rent. It felt right. It felt like using her gift for its true purpose. The bank was skeptical about a small business loan for a soup shop from a former real estate agent, but I showed them my plans. I showed them the recipes. I talked about my mom. I think the passion in my voice, the sheer certainty that this was what I was meant to do, is what convinced them. They gave me the loan. The next 2 months were a blur of pure physical work. I was at the shop from sunrise until late at night. I scraped floors. I sanded counters until they were smooth. I painted the walls a warm, buttery yellow. Carol stopped by almost every day, bringing me lunch or just sitting on a paint bucket to keep me company. She told me about the town, about who was who, about what people might want. Mr. Green even drove up from Miami for a weekend, bringing his tools and helping me build the shelves for the pantry. We didn't talk much, just worked side by side. It was his way of saying he approved. It meant everything. I hired a local kid, a high school senior named Jake, who wanted to be a chef. He was quiet, but he watched everything I did with intense focus. I taught him how my mom wanted the onions diced for the soup, not too big, not too small. I showed him how to stir the stew so it wouldn't stick to the bottom of the big new pot. We were a team. The night before we opened, I was alone in the shop. Everything was ready. The bowls were stacked, the spoons were polished. The soup for tomorrow, her classic potato soup, was chilling in the giant refrigerator, ready to be reheated. I sat at one of the tables and looked around. My hands were calloused. I had a cut on my thumb from a can lid. I was more tired than I had ever been in my life. And I was happier. I took out the letter, the one from Mr. Green. I hadn't read it since that first devastating time. I unfolded it carefully. Her handwriting was so familiar it made my heart ache. My dearest Eric, if you're reading this, then you finally have my recipe box. And if you have the box, it means you're finally ready. I know you thought I didn't see you, but I did. I saw the successful man you became, and I saw the lonely boy hiding inside him. I tried to reach you, but you had built such high walls.
That night, when you said I was a burden, it broke my heart. But not for the reason you think. It broke my heart because I knew you truly believed it. You believed that love, that connection, was a weight holding you down. I knew I had to get out of your way.
I couldn't be the thing you resented, but I also couldn't leave you with nothing. The house was just a thing. It would have been another trophy, another empty victory. But these recipes, this is our life, Eric. This is your history. This is my love for you written down in cups and teaspoons. I am giving you the blueprint for a home. It's the only thing I have that's truly worth giving. Use it. Build a life that is full, not just full of things. I love you more than you will ever know. Be happy, my son. It's all I ever wanted. Love always, Mom. I folded the letter and put it back in my pocket. I didn't cry. I just felt a deep, solid peace. She hadn't abandoned me. She had set me free. And in doing so, she had led me right here. The next morning, I arrived at 5 a.m. to start the soup. Jake was already there, looking nervous and excited. We worked in a comfortable silence, chopping, sautéing, simmering. By 11 a.m., the open sign was lit. The smell of potato soup, thyme, and fresh bread filled the space and drifted out the open door. The first customer was Carol. She sat at the counter and ordered a bowl. I ladled it out myself, placed it in front of her with a slice of warm bread. She took a spoonful, closed her eyes, and smiled. "Tastes like home, Eric," she said. And then people started to trickle in. A couple of shopkeepers from down the street, a family with young kids, an older man who came in alone and sat by the window. The room filled with the sound of quiet conversation, of spoons clinking against bowls, of life. I stood behind the counter, watching it all. This was it. This was the home she wanted me to have. Not a house, but a place of connection, a place of warmth, a place built not on transactions, but on her recipes. I'm not a real estate agent anymore. I'm a soup maker. My suit and tie are packed away. My days are now measured in simmering pots and the smiles of satisfied customers. The money I make is modest. It's nothing compared to my old commissions, but it's real. It's earned with my own two hands, following my mother's blueprint. I failed her in so many ways, but I didn't fail her in this. I built the life she knew I needed. I finally came home. If this story found a place in your heart, if it reminded you of something you've lost or something you hope to find, let me know. Leave a comment, hit that like button, and subscribe. This chapter of my life is finally beautifully closed, but a new one is just beginning, and I can't wait to see what's in the next pot.